focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil, contextualized conversation with perspective.
Tonight, the heroic efforts to rescue Maui residents from the deadly wildfires. Then, as inflation ticks up again, extreme heat is taking a bite out of grocery budgets. And why demand for electric vehicles is sending this U.S. company to the bottom of the ocean on the CBS Evening News.
We call it a sham indictment, and the man that's doing it, I really believe he's mentally ill.
All the typical racial slurs that you can imagine.
I will support efforts in states around the country, like Iowa just courageously provided, to protect the unborn, and I will stand for and champion the right to life from the Oval Office. I promise you.
After all these promises, after all these years, we need somebody that's going to get the job done.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Special counsel Jack Smith is now recommending the trial in the January 6 case begin on January 2nd, 2024. The move comes as former President Trump and his longtime aide, Walt Nauta, pleaded not guilty to additional charges in the classified documents case. Trump did not appear in federal court in Florida today to enter that plea. His two co-defendants did show up. Amid Trump's legal troubles, officials are receiving threats. FBI agents shot and killed an armed man who allegedly made violent social media posts about President Biden. That happened yesterday. And Fulton County DA Fani Willis down in Georgia has received threatening emails ahead of her possible indictment of Trump in Georgia. For more on all of these stories, Nicole Killian and David French join us now. Nicole is a CBS News congressional correspondent, and David is an opinion columnist for the New York Times. Nicole, let's begin with a discussion of Georgia. The DA down there, Fani Willis, what a decision she has in the coming days, whether to charge a former president of the United States for pressuring election officials in the days after the 2020 election. But ahead of that charging decision, she's facing her own political fire from former President Trump and his allies. Let's watch an ad that just went up.
Biden's newest lackey, Atlanta DA Fani Willis, so incompetent. On her watch, violent crimes have exploded.
When you see that ad from the Trump campaign, and then you look at your own reporting on what's happening in Georgia, tell me, Nicole, about what's the atmosphere in Georgia ahead of this decision on whether to charge Trump or not.
Well, it certainly has changed the game from a political and legal standpoint. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't think of a time, normally when we see campaign ads like this, they're going after political rivals, not prosecutors. So that is a change in strategy, certainly on the part of the former president, really in terms of potentially trying to taint the jury pool there in Georgia. And I think that's why we saw such a forceful response from the district attorney in a notice that she sent out to her staff, calling this ad derogatory and false, and also instructing her staff not to respond in any form to these kinds of charges, and saying as well, reaffirming that she continues to get threats. I mean, she says that, again, these are derogatory and false charges, but she also kind of defended her role, that she is going to continue to follow the law, that this is not personal, this is about business. So certainly she is not intimidated by this ad, other threats that she has received. She is continuing to do her job. And I think also that is why you're seeing such a strong security presence outside of the courthouse. I mean, if you think about it, we have seen some type of security for the better part of 2 weeks now. So this is something that not only the district attorney is taking seriously, but certainly law enforcement there in Georgia. We know the sheriff has said that they have received dozens of threats, and not just to the district attorney, but to county officials writ large. And so that explains part of that security presence as we prepare for this possible charging decision to come down, which could be in a matter of days.
Just a matter of days, David, there could be 4 indictments facing former President Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner. In your opinion, what does that mean for the national political scene?
Well, I mean, I think that we don't have to speculate very much, that as of now, there's zero indication that the indictments are hurting Trump in the GOP primary electorate. If anything, all the evidence points to the idea that the indictments are helping Trump in the GOP primary. So over the short to medium term, it appears that the indictments are not going to dent Trump's popularity with Republicans at all. And in fact, may well help him secure the nomination. That we saw that the special counsel is seeking a January trial date for the January 6th indictment. That's going to be right before the trial then would be taking place during the Iowa caucuses, maybe even moving into the Nevada primary, for example. And in that circumstance, the best guess is that that's going to boost him in these crucial early states, which is a terrible thing to say. I mean, the indictment is credible. The indictment is powerful and it will boost him. That's a terrible thing to say, but it's also the political reality.
David, when you say it's going to boost him, you've been tracking conservative politics for many years. Why do you believe it's going to boost him? Help me understand how you see that dynamic.
Well, he has very effectively sold the idea, and with the willing assist of sort of the right-wing infotainment media world, the idea that all of this is a political attack, that none of this is a credible legal case. None of these cases are credible legal cases. All of these are political attacks by people that right-wing media and Trump have primed to believe that sort of all of the system is stacked against Trump, that the story of Donald Trump is not a story of a corrupt president and a corrupt person, but the story of a courageous president who's been subject to persecution. And so therefore they cast this and have successfully cast this as just more persecution.
Nicole, help us understand exactly how this could play out next week. I followed this as a reporter, but even I'm confused at times. There was a special grand jury investigation that investigated all of what former President Trump did with his allies like Rudy Giuliani. This went on for a long period. They wrote a report and they filed the report. Now you're saying a grand jury that's new, a different grand jury is going to be convened and then charges brought. Does that mean it goes immediately to trial, or is there a new investigation on top of this so-called special grand jury?
So what we're talking about, there are two different types of grand juries. That special purpose grand jury that you referenced was strictly an investigative body. So to make it analogous to what we covered with the January 6th hearings, I mean, it was similar in nature, right? Where you're bringing in witnesses. This is really just a body designed to investigate. And so that's why they came out with a report. We do know that they potentially recommended indictments of multiple people, suggested perjury charges that some of the witnesses should face, whether or not the prosecutor hews to that remains to be seen. But now, in this final phase of the investigation, the district attorney will be taking that evidence, including some of these findings by the special purpose grand jury, putting it before a regular grand jury, which will analyze this evidence to determine whether or not there should be an indictment. That is really their sole purpose. And so it's not the district attorney's decision, right? I mean, she's going to present this evidence, and it's up to the jury to return this true bill or to not. And then we will know whether or not the former president and potentially some of his allies will be indicted.
But quickly, we hear that a grand jury, this new grand jury, will convene next week in Fulton County.
That's correct. And so, again, not a trial jury, just a regular grand jury. They are strictly there to decide whether or not to indict the former president, which is a heavy charge. And again, another reason why we have seen a lot of security around the courthouse as of late. And of course, if he is indicted, then we would move forward with that legal process where the former president could potentially be arraigned, a trial date would be set, etc.
And David French, very quickly, we have to get out of here, but I want your take. Who else besides Trump could break through in the coming month or two with the first debate? Who are you watching?
I'm really not watching anyone in particular. There's no real candidate that's emerging. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy, by a poll today, has now moved ahead of Trump, moved ahead of DeSantis, but he seems as if he's purely Trumpist. So it's very difficult to see anyone breaking out, to be honest.
Well, we'll keep an eye on your column in the New York Times. Nicole Killian and David French, thank you. We appreciate it. Now, the Iowa State Fair, that kicks off today. It's a stop for many Republican presidential candidates, and we'll take you there to the Hawkeye State, and we'll speak to a surrogate for the Biden campaign, a Democrat, about what they're watching. You're streaming America Decides.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
the threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
people are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. So Iowans, they know election season. They know what it takes in presidential politics. In their state fair, I've been there. I can tell you it's not just about corn dogs and presidential candidates and handshakes. It's really an opportunity to make your mark in the presidential race. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz joins us now from Des Moines, Iowa, where he is stumping for President Biden's re-election campaign at the state fair. Governor, thanks for being with us. What are you doing in Iowa? I thought the Democrats are all focused on South Carolina.
No, I'm down here. Well, it's obviously one of the two best state fairs in America, along with Minnesota. But down here to make the case that the Biden-Harris administration, certainly in Minnesota, has delivered on everything from broadband to education to health care expansion. And I think it's important for us to be here in a really important Midwestern state, our southern neighbor, making the case that these policies are improving people's lives. And I think Americans are going to get a choice here in about 17 months of either going backwards or moving forward with policies that enhance their lives.
Iowa's been trending to the right in some respects in recent years. Do you believe Democrats can be competitive there in 2024?
Oh, absolutely. I said same with Minnesota. I think this is a purple state. Certainly always going to be hard. I spent time with state senators, the party chair. But let's be very clear. The results this week in Ohio, and the governor and the legislator here are moving on a ridiculous ban on women's reproductive freedoms and personal choices is going to be a central issue of this campaign too. So that, coupled with a really great economic policies coming out of the Biden-Harris administration, Iowa's definitely in play. And be very clear to the Republicans, there is no path to the White House if they don't win Iowa. So we plan on playing here.
But what would you say, Governor, to Iowans who look at the Democrats' decision to move away from the Iowa caucuses and think that Democrats aren't paying as much attention as they used to Iowa? What's your answer to that concern if you ever hear it on the trail?
Yeah, look, I wanted Minnesota to be a first caucus state, but it's a decision we made. We're a national party. We know we've become more diverse. I think Michigan and South Carolina are great choices. I personally wish we'd have stayed in Iowa, but look, all the states that aren't first really matter. We've got to win Wisconsin. We've got to win Minnesota. We've got to win Pennsylvania. So it doesn't change the calculus that much. And I think you go to a primary where you get folks higher participation numbers, because be very sure about this. Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, and we will vote. So I think, again, Iowa's in play, just like Minnesota. While we're not a first state, we're an important state. And the blue wall that's being reestablished across the northern part of the country needs to include Iowa.
You say it would be your personal preference to have Iowa go first. Do you believe next time around in 2028 the Democrats should think about, if not starting in Iowa, starting somewhere in the Midwest?
I don't think it would hurt to rotate that. You know, I'm not the one to make these decisions. I'll do what needs to be done to make sure that we win. I think bringing it back out here, seeing the excitements of Democrats out here. I think, I've traveled. I was in Indiana. I'll be down in Nebraska. I think we need to be very careful that writing off any states that have a long progressive history, folks that have had not that long ago either Democratic governors or, in the case of Iowa, entire delegation. So I think the idea of rotating through these states is something that I've kind of advocated for. So I hope we get to 2028, we're back here. One way or another, we're going to be campaigning in Iowa. We're going to be making the case because, again, this extreme agenda is not going to be echoed down there. They're down there debating whether slavery had a value to it. We're talking about creating jobs and feeding children. So we'll be in Iowa. Whether it's first or whether it's 10th, we're still going to be competing.
You're there as so many Republican presidential contenders are coming to the state, coming to the Iowa State Fair. When you assess the field beyond former President Trump, how do you see the leading rivals for Trump, and what are Democrats going to do to prepare for them should they be the nominee?
Well, look, they're all basically saying the same thing. They're too fearful of President Trump. They won't say anything that should clearly be stated. He will be their nominee, but there's not an inch of difference between most of them. Governor DeSantis is now on to Shakespeare. I don't know, tomorrow it's flip-flops. Who knows? Just ridiculous things that they get obsessed with. It won't make any difference. I think our focus on this is voter turnout, voter engagement, and then telling the positive story of the Biden-Harris administration. Look, Minnesota's got the lowest unemployment rate and some of the best growth that we've seen in decades, and it's because of the policies coming out of a really difficult economic hand that was dealt coming out of the Trump failed presidency. We're going to be there. So I tell folks, don't worry about what they're doing. Stay in our lane, mind our business. We'll get the president reelected.
What about President Biden's reelection chances? Obviously, he's the front runner. He's facing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at this point. But one of your own Minnesota Democratic colleagues, Congressman Dean Phillips of Minnesota, is thinking about a run for president. Have you talked to Congressman Phillips, and have you expressed any concern about his exploration of a bid?
Yeah, well, Dean is a friend of mine. He's a great congressman. I've not talked to him personally, but I made it very clear. Look, the president's our nominee. He's going to get reelected. I've served as a minority member of Congress. It can be a pretty desolate place at times. So I think at the end of the day, Dean won't be running on this. He'll be with us. He'll make sure the president gets reelected. And as far as the other candidates, the anti-Semitism and the COVID denial totally disqualifies Mr. Kennedy, and I think, we're fine. We'll get the president to get his nomination and then on to getting reelected.
Are you hearing any concerns about President Biden's age when you're on the campaign trail in Iowa?
No, I think, the ageism that comes out is, I got asked this question, are you worried that, the president's not out as much as the Republicans are? If I were them as a strategist, I would tell them to talk less, because everything they say is not what Americans want. President's down in New Mexico. Vice President Harris was out here 2 weeks ago. Surrogates like myself are all over the country. President wakes up every day, doesn't complain, gets the work done, is gracious, humble, and most importantly is getting results. So I don't worry about it at all. My mom's 88, living on the farm by herself. We got good folks doing good work across this country. Age is not just the only factor.
And Governor, finally, I have to ask, you are a sitting governor appearing in Des Moines, Iowa at the state fair. I don't know if you've had a corn dog or not yet. Are you thinking about running for president down the line, maybe in 2028? This seems like an early exploration step for you.
Well, that's a long ways off. I said I'm a dad also of a 16-year-old, so I live hour to hour in my life right now. But I'm just down here to make sure the president gets reelected. I'm proud of the work we've done in Minnesota. We've proven that progressive policies can improve lives and expand personal freedoms. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But my goal right now, reelect President Biden.
That wasn't a no. We're going to keep an eye on you, Governor, as you move forward in Democratic politics. Thanks so much for taking the time and stopping by.
Thanks, Robert.
That wasn't a no. You know when they're heading to Iowa, they're thinking about something down the line. Maybe, just maybe. So we'll be keeping an eye on the Minnesota governor. We also want to let you know that America Decides is heading back to the Hawkeye State where they're now. We'll be there next week, live from the Iowa State Fair in Des Moines on Wednesday night. That'll be right here on CBS News Streaming. In the Iowa caucuses, they might be up first, but the New Hampshire primary isn't far behind. Next, we'll take you inside a popular stop for Republicans on the campaign trail. You're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman. Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Welcome back to America Decides. Presidential contenders on the Republican side, they're making the rounds up in New Hampshire, the Granite State. For many of them, that so far has included a stop at the so-called No BS Backyard Barbecue. It's a series of gatherings for New Hampshire Republican voters to hear from presidential hopefuls. They're hosted by former Republican Senator Scott Brown. He joins us now from New Hampshire. Senator, Ambassador, good to have you on the program. We appreciate it.
Robert, it's great to be on.
I can't believe it's been 13 years since I was up there in Boston covering you when you won that Senate race after Senator Kennedy left. What a ride you've had since then. Now you're a former Massachusetts senator, now a New Hampshire guy. So tell us, what's your assessment of where things stand in your new state, your adopted state of New Hampshire?
Well, I'm actually from here. I was born here. I'm 13th generation son of the American Revolution, born right at the naval station, Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. And my family's here. It's great to be home. That was always our plan. And when my parents got divorced when I was 1, I actually ended up in Massachusetts. But listen, it's wonderful to be here. You referenced the No BS Backyard Barbecues. In 16, we had 16 of the 18 presidential candidates, with President Trump being the last one. So far, as you referenced, we had Nikki Haley. We had about 400 people in the rain. We had Asa Hutchinson. We just had Governor DeSantis. And this Sunday, we have Vivek Ramaswamy. We then have Mayor Suarez. And then we have Governor Burgum. And then we're going off to Vice President Pence and then Tim Scott on the 4th and 7th of September. And people take it very seriously here. We are the first in the nation. As you know, the Democrats chose to not come and participate in the first in the nation. So RFK Jr. will win New Hampshire. And he has a lot of support. As you referenced, you remember my race. A lot of those people are now supporting him. They're out, they're energized, and there's a lot of activity here for sure.
Why aren't you backing former President Trump, who nominated you to be an ambassador? You served most of his term representing this country in New Zealand. Why do you want to be more of an arbiter of the New Hampshire primary, kind of playing more of a shepherd role?
Well, I was the longest serving ambassador under President Trump, and it was an honor to serve and represent our country. That being said, the whole thing behind these Scott Brown No BS Backyard Barbecue is that at the end of it, I will endorse, as I did last time. I think it's very important to have a public figure, somebody who understands and knows the people that are coming in, to be able to give the voters in New Hampshire the ability to really ask any and all questions. And we don't just have Republicans. These are independent voters, undecided voters, Democrats, Republicans, independents, all age groups, you name it, they're here. And you probably know this, maybe your viewers and listeners don't, but the kind of the running thing is, hey, what do you think about Governor DeSantis? Well, he's a great guy. He's done a great job in Florida. I'm going to meet him 5 or 6 more times. I mean, that's what they expect here, to be able to handshake, look you in the eye, and ask you any and all questions. And that's what we provide here.
Who has impressed you the most so far?
Yeah, listen, they all have their own strengths. I know and like Nikki Haley a lot. I thought she was very well-spoken and addressed every question. So far, every single candidate has answered every question. They haven't sidestepped. And when you get the old bougie-woogie, people kind of avoid it. But no one has avoided any questions. And there's been some great questions. You name it, from climate change to obviously abortion rights. I mean, you name it, they ask it. And if they can't compete here in New Hampshire, how are they going to compete on the stage with President Trump if he decides to show up? And the others, they have to be able to answer these questions by looking somebody in the eye and not, kind of waffling.
What about former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie? He thinks he has a path in New Hampshire, having that kind of town hall style campaign. Do you buy it?
Yeah, listen, I know Chris. He hasn't. We've been kind of going back and forth and getting him here. We had him in 16. He has a very unique style. He likes to be combative, as we've seen recently. And his style is the town hall style. He loves it, as I do, and many other people. There's a lot of people feel uncomfortable with it. Don't forget John McCain. The McCain Express. That's what he did. He parked himself here, and I think the path to victory in New Hampshire is to have somebody come here and basically live here until the primary and then work as hard as you can getting each and every voter out. That's the key.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Ambassador Haley. We'll have to keep an eye on her campaign, and we'll keep an eye on your backyard barbecues. Hopefully you can save some barbecue for us at CBS News if we come up there and visit pretty soon.
You're always welcome. Always
Thank you,
welcome.
Senator and Ambassador Scott Brown. We appreciate it. That does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.